You're watching GMT on BBC World News. Our top stories. Russia denies claims that it was behind the murder of a prominent journalist in Ukraine. Arkady Babchenko, a vocal Kremlin critic, was shot dead in Kiev. Ukrainian police are linking his death to his work. Could Italy's political crisis yet be resolved? There are reports of new efforts by the two populist parties to form a government. Thousands strike in Greece in protest against new austerity cuts linked to the country's massive bailout bill. Also in the programme, the American television network ABC cancels the hit comedy Roseanne after describing remarks by its star as repugnant. She's apologised to the people who've lost their jobs. Hello and welcome to GMT. I'm Geeta Gurumuthy. Russia's foreign minister has rejected suggestions that Moscow was behind the murder of one of Russia's best-known investigative journalists, Arkady Babchenko, in Ukraine. Sergei Lavrov says it's very sad that the Kremlin is being accused even before an investigation has begun. And he's dismissed the allegations as part of a campaign against Russia. Well, Mr. Babchenko was shot dead at his home in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. He'd been a fierce critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin and had previously expressed fears for his life. Caroline Rigby reports.
Arkady Babchenko was one of Russia's best-known investigative journalists. An outspoken critic of the Kremlin, as well as Russia's actions in Syria and eastern Ukraine, the 41-year-old claimed he'd suffered a campaign of harassment and feared for his life in his home country. That, he said, led him to move to Ukraine last year, and it was at his apartment block in the capital, Kiev, where the 41-year-old was shot and fatally wounded. His wife told police she was in the bathroom when she heard gunfire. She found her husband lying in a pool of his own blood. He'd been shot in the back and died in an ambulance a short time later.
Of course, it's about finding out who was behind it. And as I have said, it's too early to say. We see simply the Russian patterns there.
С нами Arkady Babchenko.
Arkady Babchenko had hosted a program on the Ukrainian channel ATR TV. This is how the station broke news of his death. And the Ukrainian Prime Minister Volodymyr Groysman described the journalist as a true friend of Ukraine who told the world the truth about Russian aggression. An investigation is now underway into Mr. Babchenko's death. Police in Kiev say the evidence points to a targeted murder related to his work as a journalist. Caroline Rigby, BBC News.
Well, with me is Famil Ismailov from the BBC's Russian service. Is it possible at this stage to discern where the truth lies in the Russian and Ukrainian accounts of this killing?
It's very hard. Well, the Ukrainians are quite quick to point finger at Russia and blame Russia for his killing. We don't know exactly what happens. Investigation is at its early stages. At the same time, with the previous cases of murders, of a similar kind of murders with Pavel Sheremet, a prominent journalist, and also a former Russian deputy and politician Denis Voronenkov, we haven't seen the results of the investigation. It was more about a year ago. Last year, those two cases happened, very prominent cases. Sheremet was killed by a bomb put under his car, and Voronenkov was gunned down, but his killer was also killed. So, you know, these are very, very similar cases. We haven't seen success in the previous investigations. And I don't see guarantee or any reason to think that in this case we will see the result of the investigation, although the investigation is still at its early stages.
And just tell us more about Mr. Babchenko and his work.
Babchenko was very well known and very respected Russian journalist. He started his journalistic work after taking part as a soldier in the first Chechen war in 1999. and he wrote absolutely brilliant memoirs of the soldiers from of the war from the soldiers' point of view. And then he started writing for Moskovsky Komsomolets, a very prominent Russian newspaper, for Novaya Gazeta. He became a war correspondent himself. He knew war at first hand, and you could write about the war in such a way that people would understand the horror of the modern war. And then he became a prominent critic of Mr. Putin's government, and his stay in Russia was more and more risky, so he moved out of Russia. His family is still in Russia. He's got one child of his own and 5 more adopted children. And they were about to move to Kiev, where he was trying to see a new life for himself, as many other Russian dissidents, but unfortunately this was cut short.
And I know there's been quite a lot of reaction already online, and I just want to bring in also news that we've had in about Bill Browder, a British financier and a vocal critic of Mr. Putin, who says he's been detained by Spanish police on a Russian Interpol arrest warrant.
Well, Bill Browder is a financier who was sought by Russia on various charges, but he himself is the person who was behind so-called Magnitsky law, and the name Magnitsky comes from Sergei Magnitsky, who was a lawyer who worked for Mr. Browder, who uncovered the absolutely, I don't know, it's just such a brilliant scheme. The 2 law enforcers in Russia found the way to get into Browder's companies, financial companies in Russia. They re-registered them on under different names with different documents, and managed to siphon, according to Mr. Browder, hundreds of millions of dollars of money which was supposed to be paid in taxes. So they revoked those taxes, and that's when Mr. Magnitsky, who uncovered it, was arrested. Unfortunately, he died in jail. And that's when Bill Browder said that, this is the time that something has to be done. And he started an absolutely huge campaign to defend, to try to as a legacy to Mr. Magnitsky's memory as an honest lawyer, and also as his fight, part of his fight against the corruption in Russia. So that's where the Magnitsky laws in the States and then in Europe came about.
Famil Ismailov, much to talk about, but we're out of time.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
No worries.
Let's get some more news this hour, because Amnesty International has accused the Nicaraguan government of unleashing what it calls a lethal strategy of repression against protesters. A new report says the government has been colluding with paramilitary groups to suppress weeks of student-led demonstrations against President Daniel Ortega. Around 80 people have died so far in the protests. It's now thought more than 4,000 people died when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico last summer, dwarfing the original estimate of just 64. A study by Harvard University found mortality rates in the US territory went up by 60% in the months after the disaster. Many of the deaths were due to interruptions in medical care, power shortages and blocked roads. A major study by Harvard and other American universities suggests that students are less likely to perform as well in exams if it is hot. Researchers analysed the test scores of 10 million students over 13 years and found a significant link between results and the weather conditions. They said for every ½ degree Celsius rise in average temperatures, pupil performance went down by about 1%. Now, as speculation continues about the possibility of a summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, the debate about North Korea's record on human rights has been largely sidelined. Direct testimony from within North Korea is exceptionally hard to record, but over many months the BBC's used a covert network of dissidents to put questions to a range of citizens. As Michael Cohen reports, they express strong views about the country's leadership and relations with the rest of the world.
North Korea is the world's most repressive regime. Ruled by the totalitarian Kim dynasty, the authorities wield an absolute control over information. Citizens' mobile phones can't call outside the country, and they have no access to the internet. Using a covert network over many months, we've been able to put questions to 2 ordinary North Koreans. They'd face retribution for this type of communication, so we're concealing their identities. Chol Ho is a father who works in the military. Sun Hui is a market trader who lives with her husband and 2 daughters. They told us about the power of the state and the country's notorious labour camps.
Sometimes the State Security Department get people by calling them spies. They make up stories for their own performance. They make people say that they were planning to go to China and then report them.
Here, there are a lot of government captures. People arrested and taken away. People cannot survive in the prison camps. They unconditionally beat you. They starve you while doing extreme labor. Once you go there, you are no longer a citizen. I think this terror is what keeps society going.
In North Korea, it is illegal to criticize the regime and carries severe punishment.
People say that Kim Jong-un acts the same as us, but takes away our money a lot. That the little man uses his head to suck up money like a vampire. The number of people who assess him positively is increasing.
In the 1990s, North Korea experienced a famine that left over 1 million people dead when the state couldn't fund its ration system. In response, black markets emerged across the country. Today, they serve as a lifeline to the population, with the regime reluctantly allowing this capitalist trade to grow. Without them, portions of the population would once again starve.
He leaves the markets alone and doesn't crack down much no matter what we do. Many people want things to continue the way it is.
And internally, there appears to be a softening in rhetoric towards the West.
Recently, they say we should be living in peace with America for everyone to have a better life.
Michael Cowan, BBC News.
Now, Italy's far-right League party is calling for a new election as soon as possible to resolve the country's political stalemate. But there are also reports from Rome that the two populist parties, League and Five Star, may make a renewed attempt to form a government with a compromise candidate. Well, let's go live to Rome and our correspondent there, James Reynolds. James, just tell us more about these latest reports of a potential compromise.
I mean, those are the reports of the last few minutes. They may be out of date by the time I finish this sentence. That's what's going on in Italian politics. But here's how it is. Let me take it back a little bit. There is a Prime Minister designate at the moment, Carlo Cottarelli, picked by the President as a pro-Euro choice, an interim choice. However, he's delaying taking office, and therefore there are rumours, there's speculation that he may be delaying while there is another attempt to get the populists to take office, but to promise to have a proper debate about Europe. That hasn't been confirmed, but that's the latest speculation here.
And what names are there in the bag as a potential compromise candidate, if any? And is it seen as likely that those two parties could work together?
It is almost possible at the moment to go through the phone book and work out who hasn't been asked to be a Prime Minister designate in the last few days. The answer is, at the moment, we have no idea. At the moment, Carlo Cottarelli is the second Prime Minister designate in a week. He has not been told to step down at the moment, so that's all we have. Whether or not there might be a compromise candidate, a third one, to allow a League five-star coalition to take office, is anybody's guess.
And James, there's been a lot of reports, obviously, that the sort of wider uncertainty that this is causing, not only to Italy's political and economic stability, but to the whole European question.
Yes, let's remember this. Italy is a founder member of the European Union. The Treaty of Rome in 1957, one of the constitutional bases for the common market in the European Union, was of course signed here. Italy, for 6 decades, has been a part of every attempt to move towards a united Europe. And therefore, any speculation here, any reports, any votes which might call into question Italy's relationship with the Union it created would have a strong effect among the European Union.
OK, James Reynolds there in Rome. Thanks very much indeed for that update. Well, to another running sore for the Eurozone, Greece, where a 24-hour strike has crippled public transport. The walkout has disrupted flights and knocked out train and ferry services as the busy tourist season gets underway. Unions are protesting against a new round of austerity linked to the country's third bailout. Well, with me is economist Vicky Price. Vicky, thanks for joining us. Just on this latest dispute, can you just unravel it for us?
Well, the thing to remember is that, of course, Greece is trying to get out of its final sort of bailout.
agreement that it has had with its creditors this summer. And of course, there are a number of conditions attached to that, which include actually continuing with some of the austerity measures, which include things like cutting pensions again, looking at the number of civil servants that are employed, looking at conditions of employment and therefore the pay of various sectors. So we've seen what's going on right now, which is even seamen are on strike, air traffic controllers are on strike, transport more generally is coming to a standstill. It carries on actually over a couple of days because of the way in which they have got that scheduled. So it is almost like the sort of last attempts to say, yes, you're going to have this deal. And you, Syriza, which is the governing party, of course, are quite close to the unions anyway. These are our demands, and that's the thing that we're worried about in terms of what will happen next. They're not going to achieve anything very much. It's happened before. Syriza is absolutely determined, which is the ruling party, and Tsipras, the head, to get that bailout and actually happen in a cleanish way. And he's going to have to promise quite a lot to get there.
When you look at what's happening in Greece and Italy, and of course we've got the Brexit talks ongoing as well, where does that leave Europe, the stability of the currency and the political stability?
Well, we're at an extraordinary situation right now. We've always said, and I've said that many times, that Greece was just a bit of an outlier. It wasn't an exception to what was going on in the Eurozone, that there were bigger issues because of the financial crisis. There had been no real institutions to back countries in difficulty when the crisis came. They're building those up now, but the conditions attached to that are quite severe, and they're severe for a number of countries, and Italy is expressing that frustration. Now, Italy is bigger, it has a huge problem on its debt, but also it is more influential. And I think there is a look now at how Europe can be reformed, particularly the Eurozone. Macron is making a number of recommendations, mutualising the debt, actually taking more responsibility across and having transfers of money to the countries that need it. Italy and Greece particularly have been affected by a huge influx of migrants without getting enough support, and that's been a big, big issue for them. So I think my view would be that Europe will have to look again at how it's run and compromise.
Do you think the Eurozone, though, can survive? Because if there are either fresh elections, for example, in Italy, I mean, that is going to turn again into another Eurozone future debate, isn't it?
Indeed, I think it's quite dangerous. But if you ask the Italians, they don't want to leave the euro more generally. They want to see some changes done in terms of the way that it's run. But certainly they're quite keen to be part of it. And if you look at Greece still, the majority of people will still tell you they'd like to stay in the euro, although that majority has been declining quite considerably, I have to say. But overall, I think life outside will probably be much harder for many of them. So I don't really think that it is going to be run as let's leave the euro. I think it will be run as let's see changes happen to the way that things are run. So I'm slightly more optimistic than many are, but this is Italy, you just never know.
Vicky Price, thanks so much for coming in. Thank you. Do stay with us here on BBC World News. Much more ahead. The hit series Roseanne is cancelled after its star tweets racist comments. We'll have all the latest.
For over 40 years, African Business Magazine has brought you unparalleled commentary.
Welcome back to GMT. I'm Geeta Gurumurthy. Now, the popular US sitcom Roseanne has been cancelled after its star, Roseanne Barr, posted a racist tweet. The American actress compared the former Obama advisor, Valerie Jarrett, to an ape on social media. James Cook reports.
Can I have some money? I don't know. Mom, can I have some money? I don't know. Can I have some money?
Roseanne Barr fronted a TV sensation.
Housekeeping.
A hugely popular sitcom from the 80s and 90s, which made a triumphant return this year.
Beep. That didn't go through. I heard a beep.
Millions tuned in to see a sympathetic portrayal of white, working-class, Trump-supporting America. It all came crashing down in a vitriolic Twitter tirade. Roseanne Barr's nastiest slur was aimed at an African-American political opponent. Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a baby equals VJ, she wrote, referring to Valerie Jarrett.
I think we have to turn it into a teaching moment. I'm fine. I'm worried about all the people out there who don't have a circle of friends and followers who come right to their defense.
Ms Barr also attacked Hillary Clinton and her daughter Chelsea, and she falsely called the billionaire investor George Soros, who as a Jewish child survived the occupation of Hungary, a Nazi. That tweet was shared by President Trump's son, Donald Jr. Ms Barr issued a partial apology, but it wasn't enough for ABC, which called her comments abhorrent, repugnant and inconsistent with our values. Roseanne's downfall was clearly her own doing, but it's likely to strengthen stereotypes in a divided America, with each side accusing the other of intolerance and hatred. James Cook, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Now, a press conference is underway in Brussels at the moment following the killing of 3 people, 2 of them police officers, in Liège on Tuesday. These are the live pictures coming to us there. And the 2 officers were killed with their own firearms. We can speak now to the BBC's Damien Grammaticus, who's following the story. He's in our Brussels office. Damien, what new information is emerging from all this?
Geeta, there are several different areas where there's information that's coming out on this. As you say, the prosecutors there laying out more facts. Now, there's new information about the sequence of events which happened. They've said, as you indicated, what we knew, that this man had attacked 2 police women, taken their guns, shot them dead in the street. They say he then went into a cafe next door, looking to see if anyone was in there. The people in there had seen the events outside and were hiding, so he didn't see them. He went outside. Then he shot dead, as we know, a 22-year-old young man, a passenger in a car, moved to a school before he was shot dead himself. More information, too, about this man and his background, the attacker. Now, he's been named in Belgian press as Benjamin Herman. The prosecutor hasn't said that himself at the minute, but what he has said is that this man was released from prison on temporary release just on Monday morning. It was just a 2-day release. He was due to be back at the end of the day on Tuesday. Of course, Tuesday he then went and carried out this attack himself. Not in this conference, but the Interior Minister has said separately they now believe that he also killed another person earlier in the sequence of events on Monday evening, who had been a cellmate of his when he was in prison. So another murder to add to this. And then the last area is more information about the victims themselves. We now know that the 2 police women were both in their mid-40s, both were mothers. One had an adult, a child who was at university studying. The other one had 2 twin children who were just in their early teenage. She was a single mother. Her husband, a policeman, apparently had died already. So it appears those 2 children orphaned by this attack. And police... Sorry, I was just going to say the prosecutors also saying they do not discount the fact that he may have been radicalised in prison.
OK, yes, I was just going to pick up on that, the potential motive for this attack.
Yes, what they say is they are investigating at the minute. It's a judge who specialises in terrorism cases has taken over the investigation because there are elements in this that point towards a terror-related motive. That's particularly the fact he seems to have targeted police officers specifically. So the prosecutors are treating it as having elements of that, but they haven't conclusively decided. They're investigating, too, things like whether he himself, the attacker, may have taken drugs before the event.
OK, Damien Grammaticus, thanks very much. Now, Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto has taken to Twitter to rule out the possibility of his country ever paying for the border wall that President Trump wants to build to stop illegal immigrants crossing into the United States. He was responding after Mr. Trump claimed at a rally in Tennessee that Mexico would eventually pay up.
They make all of this money and they do absolutely nothing to stop people from going through Mexico, from Honduras and all these other countries, the caravan, all of this stuff. They do nothing to help us, nothing. They're going to pay for the wall and they're going to enjoy it, okay? They're going to enjoy it. They do nothing for us.
Well, the Mexican president tweeted his response in both Spanish and English, saying, "No, not now, not ever." He then signed off, "Sincerely, Mexico, all of us." You can tweet me if you like. I'm at Geetha Gurumurthy. There's much more, of course, online on all our stories. Some of them are still developing, and we will update you in the coming hours. Thanks for watching. I'm Geetha Gurumurthy. Bye-bye.